For everyone who is here, I do want to acknowledge our special guest, the reason we are here, and that is for our guest, Dorian L. Jackson. Mr. Jackson is a lawyer and a founding attorney and CEO of the DLJ law firm. Mr. Jackson also has some accolades behind him, as he's been selected as a rising star by the Super Lawyers magazine 4 times, an accolade only bestowed to 5% of attorneys in Los Angeles. Mr. Dorian, thank you for joining us today. We're here with students from 9th through 12th grade in the Los Angeles area. We're excited to learn a little bit about your role, what you do, and maybe compare it to some of their own aspirations. So would you be okay just introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit more about your organization and the type of work that you do?
So my name is Dorian Jackson, and just one clarification, it's 5% of all attorneys in the state of California, not just the LA area. So I just want to make sure the accolades are correct. I started a law firm in 2012. My law firm specializes in estate planning, probate, and litigation involving trusts in estates. So that's pretty much the wheelhouse in this particular area of law that I practice. The kids may or may not be aware, there's various different areas of law that you can go into, and so mine is specified in the trust and estates field.
Thank you for that clarification. And that's absolutely true. Students often understand what a lawyer is. It is a popular career in culture, in our daily lives. How did you select this particular form of law?
It was something that I was interested in law school. Wills, Trusts, and Estates is sort of like one of the general classes you take in law school. And I enjoyed that class. And then as I got out into practice and started to get a little bit of experience in it, I enjoyed working with the elderly. I enjoyed helping the elderly, assisting the elderly, a lot of times vindicating the elderly through the litigation. So as I got a little bit of experience in it when I started, I just sort of gravitated more towards that field and just made it my focus.
So trust, these are things that maybe our students are hearing for the first time. What does that,
Yeah.
what does that look like? What does that process look like? What does that mean?
Before I answer that, I just kind of want to piggyback off what you said about the questions and just sort of pass on a lesson that I learned from my grandmother. So my grandmother was from South Carolina, and she had a saying that she always repeated that sticks into my head to this day that I still use, which is a closed mouth doesn't get fed, right? And she would say that all the time. And it's always stuck out in my mind. And a lot of times you'll be surprised, you can get stuff merely by asking where a lot of people don't. So questions are incredibly powerful because questions are how we learn, right? Questions are how we obtain knowledge. So you should never be afraid to ask questions, and you should ask as many questions as you want until you feel that you have gained the knowledge that you're seeking. So I agree that questions are important, and always remember, closed mouth never gets fed. So going back to your question about trust, people are probably more familiar with last will and testament. Last will and testament, though, are very often misunderstood. People seem to think that they are probate court avoidance, but they're not. A living trust is similar to a last will and testament. The difference, well, the key difference being, there's several differences, but the key difference being is a will doesn't have to go through court, whereas a will does have to go through court, whereas a living trust does not. It operates outside of court.
I see. Yeah, and this is going to be a great information for myself as I'm not familiar with this as well as many probably our students. Is this the kind of work? Is this kind of law? Are you exposed to this in law school, or what does the law school process look like? Is it really focused on a particular form of law, or are you exposed to different types while you're in school?
Well, law school is somewhat similar to undergraduate, and you have sort of general courses. Now, they're not necessarily called GEs as they are in undergraduate, but they operate in the same fashion. So there's certain courses that everyone has to take, like con law, which is constitutional law, real property, wills, trusts, and estates, contracts, the key areas of law that are tested on the bar. So those are the courses that are sort of general education courses, if you will. And then after that, you sort of have free reign to kind of dabble in certain courses that you find interesting over your time in law school. So it operates very similarly to undergraduate. It's just shorter in that it's generally 3 years, and it's just more focused in that you're not taking like, you know, psychology and philosophy and biology, which are vastly different fields. Everything you're taking is related to the law. It's just the law is such a nebulous thing. There's various different areas of it.
Could you tell us about students who might be interested in becoming lawyers? What kind of education and training did you undergo, and what could students expect if they decide to go in this field?
So law, to be an attorney in the state of California, you have to have an undergraduate degree. Now from there's two paths. You don't necessarily have to go to law school, which a lot of people don't realize. You can do what's called sort of a self-study program, where you work for an attorney for 4 years under the attorney's supervision. And then after that period of time, if you can take the bar, and if you pass, then you become an attorney. So there's more than one route. It's not just the law school route, but law school is one avenue, the main avenue that most people take. So it's generally an undergraduate degree, which is college, right? And then after college, you either work for an attorney for 4 years, or like most people, you go to law school and then graduate and then take the bar.
And what was your path? Did you end up going to law school, or did you work with a lawyer after receiving your undergraduate degree?
No, I went to law school. So I went to UCLA for undergraduate. And after UCLA, I went to Loyola for law school, which is in downtown LA. And then after 3 years, took the bar and then became an attorney. So I went sort of the more traditional path, but I just think it's important to tell students, particularly students of color, because the key thing about going to law school is it's incredibly expensive. And you're going to take out substantial amount of loans, and you're going to go into substantial amount of debt. And the best thing that you can do with education is come out with as little debt as possible. That should be one of your main focuses. As far as I'm concerned, your focus with education should be getting the best grades that you can get, because that's going to open doors for you. Because as people of color, or people from not wealthy families, education in this country is the equalizer, right? And people should really understand it doesn't operate like this in a lot of other countries. If anyone has been to Central America, it operates very differently. I've been to Nicaragua, I've been to Costa Rica, been to several Central American countries, and it's more like a caste system down there. Whereas if you go to public school, you're sort of in the lower class, and you have little to no option of getting into college or even graduating. Whereas here, anyone can go to college, right? You can start off with a junior college and then transfer to an undergraduate degree. So America is a very special place in that education is the bridge between where you were born and where you want to be. So you have to approach that bridge seriously with getting the best grades that you can get, because that's going to open doors for you. But then also you want to make sure you have as little debt as possible, because when you come out, if you have a lot of debt, that's going to limit the amount of income and disposable income that you have to do whatever you want with, like buy property or buy vehicles or help out your family, right? Whereas if you have little debt or no debt, now all of that earning power that you're generating, which is generally going to be close to 6 figures starting off, right, is now available to do whatever you want with it. So, get the best grades that you can get. Always try to get the A. Obviously, if you don't get the A, that's fine, but try your hardest to get those A's, and then focus on no debt, or little to no debt as possible. So those would be my big things.
Yeah, you touched on two very important themes that students who've partaken in our program understand very well. Do as best you can in school to have those options in school, and the debt, what that I don't want to just kind of gloss over, because that's something that students considered even going into undergraduate. I did see an important question that's relevant to undergraduate. What kind of degree do you need to study as undergraduate? Do you need to be a specific political science major, or could you do something else to study law?
No, it's you can do whatever you want, and it's kind of funny too because poli sci is sort of considered the prototypical thing for law school, but it has nothing to do with law. It's just the science of politics.
Right.
So it's kind of I've always kind of been shocked at poli sci, and everyone thinks that, you know, it's not just, you know, students asking questions. Everyone seems to think poli sci is the degree to go to. Personally, I was a philosophy major, and I would strongly recommend, if not majoring in philosophy, minoring in philosophy, and here's why. Um, as I said before, there's various different areas of law, okay? But the overarching area of law that we're all familiar with is, you know, from TV and in media, is litigation, meaning like trial type stuff, right? So like Law and Order, or, you know, whatever cop show or show about, you know, law and justice, right? Where you're making arguments and you're trying to win the case. That sort of is a big umbrella of litigation. And litigation comes down to making arguments. And so you have to know how to create a solid argument, and you also have to understand how to dissect or break down your opponent's argument, right? And that's all philosophy is. Philosophy is literally the study of making solid arguments and dissecting arguments. So by having that background, I think it really helps you when it comes to law school, because that's a lot of what you're going to be doing, is arguing for or against different viewpoints based on, you know, the legal authority that you have at your disposal.
Yes, that's a great point. I actually study political science, and I can tell you I would not be the slightest bit prepared for law school had I tried after undergraduate. So that's a good point, students. You see, philosophy, a great avenue as constructing arguments, very
Right.
important.
And let me just add one other thing. You don't have to necessarily do philosophy. It's just philosophy is dear to my heart, and I would suggest it. Whatever you do is fine. Just whatever you do, enjoy, right? Because in undergraduate, it's a very intensive thing. It's not like high school, right? Like when you go from high school to college, it's like going from the minor leagues to the pros, right? Like you're not in the same class anymore. And particularly at college, it's like they only accept a certain amount of people. So everyone that you're associating with now just got smarter, right? So you're competing against a higher quality pool of people. So you want to make sure that you're enjoying what you are studying, because typically if you enjoy what you study, you're going to be better at it. And what I did is, because I have a long story, and I started college in the 90s, but didn't finish until the 2000s. So that's a whole other long story that we can talk about later. But when I went back to school, I treated school like my hustle, right? It was pretty much, I was on the grind for that A, right? And if anybody wasn't on the grind for that A, then you couldn't be in my cipher. I couldn't have you in my area, because I was focused on what I wanted to do, and I wanted to change my life. And I knew that I could change my life with this law thing, right? So in order to get to the good law school, I had to get those good grades at undergrad. So I only surrounded myself with people that were on that similar wavelength, and I ended up doing really well. And then I got into law school, and it was the same type of thing. And now, you know, I'm in the position where, you know, me and my wife bought our own home. You know, I drive a Tesla that I bought cash. We're going on a vacation to Hawaii. So my life and my family's life has changed with this legal thing that I did. But it's all about that drive and determination. Anyone can be an attorney. It's not that hard. It's just hard work. So if you're willing to work hard, you can do it. Don't think that you're not smart enough, because trust me, I've been at law firms where I saw people who were morons that were attorneys, and you'll be surprised. There's a lot of people that aren't that bright that are attorneys. Anyone can do it. It's just a matter of, are you willing to do the work, and are you willing to work hard enough to get there?
Very, very important life lessons that we try to enforce. Now, students, what they're thinking about And sometimes I've noticed they put a lot of pressure on themselves to have a decision, to know what they're going to do right after high school, what career they're going to pursue. And life doesn't always work out that way, right? As adults, we
No, not at
understand
all.
that
Mhm.
things change and our plans change. So going back to you, did you always know that you wanted to do law, or how did you come back to that? How did you come back
No,
to
not at all.
passion?
The funny thing is, if you would have told me my first year at UCLA in 1994 that I'd been a lawyer, I would have laughed at you, right? It's just life, when you're in high school seems like the most important thing in the world, right? You're a teenager, you're growing, you're a little bit older, you're not necessarily a kid anymore, but you're not quite an adult. You're at this different phase of life, and everything in high school seems more important, so important. Then you go to college and realize none of that mattered. So I would just say, going back to my earlier point, you know, college is the equalizer. And in this country, it's like I said, it's very rare. It's pretty much a westernized thing, which why I assume a lot of people who immigrated here, whose parents brought them here in the first place, right, was to have this opportunity, which is education. Because in a lot of countries, you don't have that. And I would strongly recommend, in my personal opinion, is this should be a part of, if not undergraduate or high school, people should have to travel to third world countries. Because when you go to a third world country and realize how difficult life is there for people and how little opportunities they have, you come back home and appreciate this country so much more. I didn't get very passionate about the United States until I went to Costa Rica. And then when I went to Costa Rica and saw like how people were living and what they were dealing with, and thinking like, I've never had that problem in my life, and I couldn't even conceive of having that. It's a different place. So we have the ability here to change our lives, and it's there for the taking. You just got to be willing to take it. So going back to my earlier point, yeah, you're not going to know what you're going to do, but study something you like, right? If you get to college, take your GEs, dabble around. If you find something that you enjoy, that you like learning about and reading about, then pursue that. You don't necessarily have to be philosophy or poli sci to go to law school. And life is a long journey. It seems so important in high school, but I mean, to be honest, I'm 44, about to be 45. I could barely remember a lot of the stuff in high school. It's just the older you get, the less significant it becomes. And life is a very, very long journey, although it seems short. So just pursue what you enjoy, try to get those best grades that you can, and try to minimize that debt.
And to that point, I haven't seen the questions come up, but I'm sure wheels are turning. And so to make sure that we address the point, how would a student walk away from law school with little to no debt? What are some steps that a student might take to do that?
Well, one of them is if you want to work, like, so for example, my law school is one of the few that has a night program. So Loyola Law School has a night program, so you can work during the day. So you can basically have a full-time job during the day and work at night. Now, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy. It's a lot of work. But again, if you come out with little debt, I mean, my wife and I have a nice house, but if we didn't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt we'd have, we'd be living by the beach right now, right? So you gotta try to figure out the way. So one is like, see if they have night programs, right? Number two, look into scholarships. Like, do all the research you can on every kind of scholarship. There's scholarships for all different kinds of things, like various, scholarships for Latinos, for African Americans, for Asian Americans, like all different kinds of stuff. Look into all the scholarships that you can. And also remember, grades. If you get really good grades, certain schools will give you money because they want you to go there, particularly if you're a person of color, because there's not a lot. I was one of two Black men that graduated my law school. Okay. I ran into a white colleague from law school, and he forgot my name, and he's like, "Hey, was your name George?" And that was the other Black guy, right? So I was like, well, you had a 50-50 shot, right? So it was a decent guess, but I mean, there's just not a lot. So if you are a person of color and you're killing it with those grades, that's going to open so many doors for you, because these universities want to say, hey, look, we have these minority people here that are coming and doing well. So that's fine. They want to brag about you, let them brag, but use that to change your life and to change your family's life.
Absolutely. And sometimes I will caution students to not pursue something solely for the money, because I think you touched on it, Mr. Jackson. Being passionate about something is critical. If you don't enjoy it, you're not even gonna get through your undergraduate degree. So that's the first checkpoint. You know, you gotta like it. But then, even despite liking something, things are challenging. So, what was the most challenging part of law school?
Oh, that's an interesting question. To be honest, for me, I think it was cultural. It wasn't really
Mm,
the academic rigor. I mean, I've always been the kind of person, if you give me, the syllabus, you tell me what to read, you tell me what we need to learn, I always do relatively well. So I didn't really have an issue with the academics. Law school was the first time I went to a private college. I'd always gone to public school. So, UCLA is public school for undergrad, for high school and junior high. So going to a private law school was kind of a culture shock, because there's a lot of these rich kids that parents have all this money, that drive up in brand new BMW 5 Series, ain't worked a day in their life. It's a different experience for them, and they have different views, which is sometimes a little hard to take. Like, I remember in contracts class, we had this one case, and it was a case involving some scam that this company did in a rent to buy situation. So the scam was something like, you buy one item, you pay a certain amount. If you don't buy it off and you buy another item, now you don't own either item until you paid off all of the items, right? So the more items you buy, basically the more in debt you go, and then they could repo and resell. Okay. So they had this convoluted contractual language that no one can understand. And
mhm,
one of these, so-called rich kids was saying, she didn't understand why this lady had to buy a stereo, right? And then I think this is one of the reasons why people like me at universities like this was important, because I raised my hand and I was like, look, if you ain't got nothing and life is hard, the highlight of your day may be playing your favorite song, which may get you through the day. But that's not something that she could even feel or understand coming from where she came from, right? So for me, it was the cultural aspects like that and interacting with people like that I hadn't really interacted with before, because we were coming from different viewpoints in life. And UCLA is such a big school. There's some rich people there, but there's a lot of people that are just average individuals. So for me, it was the cultural aspect that was the most difficult, but not the educational.
to that point, many of our students are thinking about maybe going to an undergraduate school that is a private school and might encounter some of that difference in culture, um, in terms of finance, as well as just ethnically different. Um, did you try to find common ground with those people who were different, or did you find a support system maybe outside of school that kind of helped you overcome some of that, those cultural challenges in school?
What was interesting is one of the big things. I played several sports in high school, but athletics, I think, are a great thing, because it puts together a whole bunch of different people, and you have to put all that stuff aside and focus on working together to achieve a goal. And the way that I kind of shedded a lot of that, you know, anxiety or issues that I had culturally, was a lot of us started to play basketball together, because our law school had a full court basketball court. So on Fridays after school, we would always get out around noon. So in our first year, a lot of us would just play basketball together, and it was a lot of fun. We even joined a private league and played a season in a private league together, because we were enjoying playing together so much. But that was I think a big bridge for me to see people in a different light, because then it wasn't just academics and them having this view that I couldn't understand. It was just us together playing a sport that we all love. So I think that was one of the things that was very important. And you should try to find common ground, because you know one of the things that that I realized going to law school is, you know, the government is made up of former lawyers, right? I think all but like 5 or 6 presidents were former lawyers. Almost everyone in Congress and Senate is a former lawyer, right? So when you go to law school, particularly a decent law school, these are going to be people that are, you know, possibly going to be in government or have important positions. So your interactions are going to be very important. I mean, there was someone who's a friend of mine to this day who was a white lady that I befriended. She wanted to be a DA, and I was thinking, you know, when we were talking, like, wow, I definitely want to get to know this girl, because if she's a DA and she has to prosecute someone who looks like me, I want her to remember this, you know, relationship. So she has a different view than what she might otherwise have, right? So I think it's important to realize that as you go up through undergraduate and particularly in graduate school, depending upon which graduate school you go to.
That's awesome. Students, I want to let you know that I am aware of the questions that are coming in, and we're going to make time to answer those questions at the end. I'm asking the question, I am picking out some that are relevant to what Mr. Jackson is saying, but if it's kind of a little bit different, we're going to make sure to answer those. So you went through the cultural challenges, you went through the hurdle of the law school. Now you're a lawyer. What do you like most about this job? And yeah, what do you enjoy most about it?
A lot of things, you know, like I'm sort of a nerd, so I like the intellectual aspect of it. I like being my own boss. I mean, it's my own company. I pay myself a salary. I don't answer to anyone. I don't have someone telling me, hey, you're supposed to be here at 8 and you're here at 8:10. Why are you late? Like, you know, I don't have to deal with any of that. So I like being my own boss. And it's funny, I talked to my wife because she's an employee, and I just told her, like, I can't work for anyone else ever again. I've been doing this for 10 years now. Like, how do I go from being the king of my own castle to answering to someone else? It's just not possible. And then I like, you know, like I like what I do. I like, particularly in estate planning and helping people. You know, it's nice. And then, you know, with the litigation, you know, there's a lot of bad things that are done to people. So it's nice to sort of be able to undo some of that in the litigation.
A student asked, have you ever lost a case? And it got me thinking. I just, full disclosure, students, and Mr. Jackson, I thought about being a lawyer at one point in my life.
Mhm.
And the thought of losing kind of affected, or losing, or not winning for my clients, or somehow
Mhm.
hurting. I thought about it. Have you lost the case, and if so, how have you kind of like bounced back from that? How have you managed those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, most cases don't go to trial. I mean, I have a trial that we're almost done with right now, but most cases don't go to trial. They settle. So yeah, sometimes we have settled it, which was less than what I wanted, you know, for my client. A lot of times we haven't. We've been very successful. I try to pick and choose my cases very carefully, which I think indicates, you know, why I'm successful. But yeah, you're not going to win every time. And I mean, look, Michael Jordan made a lot of shots, but he missed way more than he made, right? So you can't be afraid of losing. And I think you have to realize, and this is far down the line, but once you're an attorney, you have to separate yourself from your client, right? Remember, you're an attorney who's representing your client. You are not your client, right? So although you may not get the best result for your client, right? That's your client's issue. It's not necessarily yours. So you have to kind of divorce yourself, because you can really drive yourself down a dark place if you get too emotionally invested. There has to be a level of detachment. Otherwise, because when I first started, I was like, I felt that pain, like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't do this. And I was really down on myself and really kind of depressed to a certain extent. But after a few years, and then talking to some colleagues and just realizing it's the client's case, it's not your case. You're going to try to do the best you can, and you're not going to feel great. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to realize that ultimately your client has to live with the repercussions, and you need to move on to the next one, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult emotionally to sort of maintain your sanity if you don't have that sort of level of separation. But yeah, you can't be afraid. You always have to try to do your best. But that's the beautiful thing about the law is, for the most part, it's black and white, right? Like, you're going to have your statutes, you're going to have your cases that tell you what is what. A lot of that resolves any differences or any other issues that may have. The law is, for the most part, pretty clear on a lot of issues. So as long as you can do your research and get everything proper, then you should be successful. And I'm pretty good at research, so I've been pretty good in that regard.
You touched on an important and another important thing about any profession, in particular law. What kind of we know we address what to study, right? So we know that there can be a variety of degrees that you can get to study law. We kind of have an understanding of the rigor, so the challenge of pushing through. What about some practical skills that you need to be successful? Are there some skills that students already have, and maybe aren't even thinking about, but they're already good at, that could help them be a lawyer one day?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, when I was a kid, I was raised by a single mom, and I felt like every conversation was sort of an argument, right? Like, if I wanted something, I had to make my case, to get it. So that, I think, that's one of the reasons why philosophy just came so naturally to me. So, making arguments, that's a large part of litigation, right? Writing, you have to be a good writer. I mean, to be honest, I didn't pay attention to writing in high school because I had no idea I was going to be a lawyer. It wasn't until I got to college that I really had to learn how to write. So writing, is really big. Being persuasive in your writing, which is another reason why I think philosophy is so important, because you have to make arguments, so you have to persuade. Reading, you have to be able to read and understand what's being said. So, your reading comprehension is important. And then also just your ability to not just advocate, but just relate to people. Because a lot of times clients, in order to get the information, they have to feel comfortable. And you need to be able to, associate with them in a way that they feel willing to open up and tell you everything, because that's the only way as an attorney you're going to be successful. And oftentimes they may not want to tell you everything because they may feel embarrassed or ashamed or whatever other issue they may have. So you really do have to be personable and learn how to connect with people. And for me, I was like always the black kid and the one or two black kid in predominantly white class. So I never really had any issues in relating or interacting with white people. I know some people in inner cities, they may find that hard because their communities are typically not very diverse in terms of having white people around. So, you just have to be able to relate and interact with all kinds of people, which is another thing why going to college is so important, because, you're going to go to a four-year university, you're going to interact with a lot of different people. And one of the reasons why I thought UCLA was such a great education wasn't really the curriculum or the school, it was the people that I interacted with, because they were incredibly intelligent from various different backgrounds that thought about things in a different way than I did. So when you hear someone else's take on something, you can sort of internalize that and put your own spin on it. So, all those things I think are pretty important.
Awesome. So I do want to take some time to address some of the questions in the chat, because I thought there were some really good ones. You mentioned going to UCLA. It is one of the top schools in the nation.
Yes, sir.
Just happens to be the closest one to many of our students, but it is a top school. Yeah. What kept you going while you were in college?
It's just motivation. Again, I had a very long story. So I started in 1994. I dropped out in 96. I started working at law firms as a file clerk. And, it was kind of an interesting experience because, there were some people, as I said before, that were not that bright, I'm not saying this to be disrespectful. I'm just being like, they really weren't. And, I was thinking, wow, this guy could be an attorney. Because, I kind of felt like that myself. Like, oh, everyone has this lofty idea that attorney is a special thing, and then, oh my God, they're so smart. No, 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 divorce yourself of that. It's just not, this is not the case. They're just average people like everyone else. They just worked hard. So I think when I kind of worked at law firms, the veil sort of dropped, because most of the people I associated with were the attorneys, because I found them to be intelligent and I found them to be intellectually stimulating, because I like to talk about things and hear different views. So those were the people that I actually talked to most of the time. And it was funny, at one point in time, one of the partners who I worked for, he came in one morning and he comes up to me and he's like, what the are you doing? Right. And, I was kind of like, wait, what? Like, you didn't even say hello. This is how he greets me in the morning. So I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, you're too smart to be a file clerk. You should be an attorney. And the funny thing was, he didn't know at that time I was actually thinking about going back to school to become an attorney. So like when he told me this, I kind of looked at this as like God speaking to me directly through this man, right? Because this man had no idea what I was thinking because I hadn't shared it with him. So what were the odds at this moment in time when I'm contemplating this, that he would give me that message? So I sort of took it as divine intervention. And at that moment, I made up my mind that I was going back to school to become an attorney. So I say all that to say the motivation was, when I went back, I was on a mission because I had experienced what life was like without a degree. And I experienced the glass ceiling, if you will, because your economic power is limited. I mean, I even had one job headhunter that told me they only pay you 30,000 because you're cute. After that, you need to have some special skills. So you're only going to get paid so much without an education. It's just the unfortunate reality of the situation. So after experiencing that for many years and going back to law school and being in a position that I'm at now, where, life is totally different, the motivation was to change my life. I didn't want to be stuck in that situation where I was living paycheck to paycheck and I didn't have anything and life was a struggle. I just didn't want that anymore. So I focused on that and never let go until I got there. And it was a long journey. It was, I had to go back to a JC for a while. So I think I started in 2002, 2003. I started, and then I passed the bar in 2010. So it was like a 7-year journey, but I got it done.
And thank you for sharing that experience. It's important for our students to know that things aren't always perfect, and if plan A doesn't work out, their plan B might be just as good. I want to just acknowledge that I messed up on the timing. I thought we were going a little bit longer, so students, I think at this time, are going to go to lunch. So Mr. Jackson, I'd like for you to have the last word for students. Any advice for them as they work through high school, and start exploring their options for college?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I just can't emphasize enough the fortunate position that we are all in because we are in this country. I mean, this is the reason why everyone is beating down their door to get here. It's not for any sort of ridiculous, criminal reason. It's because the economic opportunity you have here is very unparalleled, particularly in this region of the world. So you have the ability to change your life. So wherever you are at with your family right now, that does not have to be where you end. In a lot of countries it is, but not here. And the way to change that is with education. So I would strongly recommend getting your degree and focusing on doing the best that you can and minimizing your debt. And that may require the family to work together too. Like everyone may have to pool money, right? I mean, it's sort of like economic Malcolm X, right? Whatever you need to do, you need to do it so that you can get there. Because once you get there, you can end up like me and changing your life, where life is a lot more comfortable than it was before. And it's really through education that you do that. So I would strongly recommend everyone pursuing education and doing the best you can. And lastly, don't focus on all the big schools. Like I know I went to UCLA, so I don't want to put any pressure on you, even though it is the best school in the world. But no, I don't want to put any pressure on you for that. But apply to a variety of schools so that you get in somewhere, and also see if you get a fee waiver. Because if you get a fee waiver based on your economic situation, then you don't have to pay for the application fee. So at that point in time, you can apply to everywhere under the sun. But just make sure that obviously you want to apply to the UCLA's, the SCs, the Stanfords, the Berkeleys, but that's creme de la creme. Everyone's not getting in there, right? So also make sure you apply to State LA or a Long Beach State or a San Diego State, another school that you can still get a good education, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what school you went to. I mean, certain schools have a certain cachet and that's great, but at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. When you apply to law school or when you apply to any other graduate school, they're going to look at your GPA, right? So just focus on making that change and doing what you can to improve the life for you and your family, because I know a lot of students probably have immigrated here themselves or one generation removed from that, right? And just realize why your family did that. Now, I obviously haven't spoken to your family, but I can pretty much guess they did it because of the educational opportunities you have here. So your family sacrificed for that. So work hard to make sure that that sacrifice was not in vain, because it's so important and it's so unlike a lot of other places, particularly in Latin America.
Mr. Jackson, I want to thank you for sharing your story, letting us know your journey through law and what it's like to be an attorney. I am going to let students go because it is their lunchtime, and despite being at home, I know they take that seriously. So I want to thank everyone who joined us today. Make sure to join us for every Wednesday as we learn about different careers. If you all could join me in a virtual applause, you could do it with the reactions in Zoom, letting Mr. Jackson know that you appreciate his time. Thank you so much.